Hey everyone, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the ending stages of group. So there's two different, I guess, starting points with this of the closing phase of a specific session. So just how to end a session with more sessions still to come, but also the closing stage is meaning like the group is terminating. So I'm going to be talking about both of those. So to start with is the closing phase. So maybe like it states in the Jacobs et al. Textbook that on page 395 that every session should have a closing phase. So what they mean by that is like we need to like wrap up the session and not just kind of go to the like keep processing to the last second, then just be like, okay, we're done. So basically, we need to be able to wrap up without cutting off. So we need to take some time. Sometimes, depending on the group, it's just like 5 minutes or so, just to have a moment to have that wrapping up. So people are kind of have this sense of completeness that like, okay, the session has an end. We had a chance to like come to that ending point and we're ready for it. So some ways to do that is to just end by summarizing. So you can summarize what kind of the key points or key themes that surfaced. It could either be you as the group leader. It could be the members maybe summarize together what came from the group. You could wrap up by talking about commitments that were made, or things that members are saying. Hey, here's what I'm willing to go out and try out this next week. Then you can also finish by addressing unfinished business, like asking it, like, is there something from today that was left unsaid that's still kind of resonating in you that you know that you need to still address? And then obviously we're not saying that to like then be able to process it. We're almost done, but basically it's priming the group to say, hey, we hear you. We know that not everything's wrapped up, but can I hear what those topics might be or what that unfinished business briefly might be so that we can address it next week. So it's basically just kind of connecting week to week. Uh, one small, I don't even like strategy with unfinished business is, so for example, in some of my internship two just classes that I teach live, sometimes topics come up right at the last minute, or like in the last 5 minutes, a student brings up something that's like, ooh, this needs a lot more conversation. So, for example, I've had a group talk about, in the political climate, so how is that impacting our clients? And there was a lot of big reactions of like that clients were really trying to make sense of a lot of, political changes around them, recently. So we only had a few minutes to process that. So I just stated, I know I'm definitely hearing that there's a lot more to talk about here. So I'll make sure to readdress this and bring this up again next week so we can talk about it and see where things are at by then. So it's giving space and like kind of helping the members know like, okay, we're not done here, but we have plans to check in. So, and remember to document as a group leader, document to remind yourself, to prime yourself to actually circle back. Uh, So just a few things to remember is make sure quieter members have a chance to talk at the closing phase too. Like if some haven't talked much, even just doing something like a round of getting everyone just to share briefly in a sentence or two what they got from the group, or doing a quick dyad of what they got from the group and then coming back to talk about it, is important. Uh, then, so those are a few thoughts on the closing phase just for a particular session, but how about terminating the entire group? So the closing stage, this is the time to prepare the members for endings, and endings can bring up a lot for people. It's important to be able to kind of have a macro level review of what occurred throughout the whole longevity of the group, what happened. So reviewing that is important. Sometimes it's usually beneficial to talk about, how have we grown as individuals, as a group. So acknowledging that growth is important. And whenever possible, finishing up business instead of the unfinished business. How can we maybe start to wrap up some of the business that we've been working on? It's kind of important. Like we won't be able to work through every single issue. There's going to be unfinished business at the end, like at the closing stage, at the termination of the group. But it's important that we don't try to open that up when it's like last session or the session prior, and like we just won't have time to address it. Uh, but there's things you can do if there is unfinished business. You can have referrals. So if there's a group that's repeating, then the group member might want to repeat the group experience with a new group, with other group members that are starting from the start again. Depending on the site, kind of depends on what resources and options you might have. A lot of times in the closing stage or terminating group, it's important to really emphasize how can we transition what you learned from here in the group to your outer relationships or your outer living. So linking the learning in the group to the outer world. Sometimes group members haven't grown how we might think they need to, or there's still some resistance. Like some of the examples from the book are like maybe someone's in like a residential like addiction treatment program and they're not owning up and kind of taking responsibility for their part in their addictions and its impact on others. So sometimes you can create a climate where you can share honest feedback to each other. Sometimes it might even be in the form of wishes, like what wishes do you have for each other as you move forward? Uh, so hopefully there can be a balance between being honest, but also kind and hopeful with those wishes and that ending feedback. Lastly, like goodbyes. Sometimes it's important just that group members have a chance to say goodbye. If they can make sense of that finality. Uh, on page 416, it kind of talks about handling goodbyes. Like, so, for example, some members, it states there that for many members, the ending of a group is the end of a special event in their lives. Like the group might mean a lot to them. They might have grown in really important ways. And to like just have that gone might be a really hard thing. So we need to be thinking of what those endings and goodbyes are like. And once again, maybe follow-up care is needed or an exit interview to talk with them a bit more would be helpful. So last, just really quick, I want to end with just naming a few skills that might be important to be thinking about utilizing at the closing stage of group, the terminating. So rounds, continuing to use rounds to just get everyone involved, to give everyone a fair chance to talk about, where they're at as the group's coming to its end. However, you're choosing to address that ending, whether it's, sharing growth that they've experienced, sharing wishes to other members, just making sure everyone has a chance to speak. Uh, One thing from the book that stood out to me on page 419 was the reunion fantasy. So it's basically like this guided imagery of like if you were to get back together in 5 years, where would you be at in your life? How would you have grown? Like where would you be at? And so then they kind of envision that, like have some reflection time to envision that, and then actually like the textbook actually talked about like giving them a chance to talk as if it had been 5 years into the future with each other. So there's different ways that you can do that. Like another option would be to just like journal about that or write about that or write a letter to yourself of 6 months or a year into the future. And then literally as group leaders, we could send those letters to themselves to kind of have them have an opportunity to remember what they learned, but from in the future. So some of those skills might be really important as you're thinking about how to wrap up a group, how to terminate. There could be a lot of strong emotions at the end. Once again, around these endings, I kind of disagree in some ways with the authors of this book. They kind of talk about how it's not the ideal time for those strong feelings, and it's kind of like one of the sections is guarding against ending with strong emotions. Depends on what those reactions are. Like to me, it depends. I think sometimes like would we be avoiding these strong reactions? Maybe it's okay to have a strong reaction about the group ending. Uh, I think the key, though, and where I do agree with the authors, is that we're not abandoning our clients. That they're not just having this big, strong reaction, and we're like, "See ya," and then they're just like walking off and in a mess, trying to figure themselves out. So we need to like kind of try to like make sure that, yeah, there will be big reactions about endings. I think, and I've experienced, just in my work. But are we abandoning our clients to like just with no support figure that out? So obviously, no, we should try to figure that out with them, or at least create a wraparound of care or a follow-up referral to help them. So those are a few thoughts, a few reactions there. So happy to check in with you with questions or comments. Thanks.